We're only a couple of months into 2025, and the aviation world has already been hit by a storm. From fiery explosions to deadly landings and mid-air collisions, strap in, folks. I'm about to reveal some of the most horrible, unexplainable plane crashes ever. No, this isn't a scene from an action movie. That Delta plane just got flipped before erupting in flames. This happened at Toronto's Pearson Airport in February 2025. But how does something like this even happen? Let me walk you through it. The iced runway, paired with a strong gust of wind, flipped this plane upside down as soon as it touched the tarmac, with a fuel leak in the wings leading to a blown-out fire. Check out the nightmarish moment as we see passengers rush out of the wreck to safety. And while I'm glad everyone got out of it alive, I gotta say, that was one cartoonish crash. What happens when an ATR climbs too high? It's a terrifying moment as the jet, with 58 passengers and 4 crew members on board, spirals out of the sky towards the ground. That explosion is catastrophic. My guess is the ATR couldn't handle the cool temperature, leading to some severe ice buildup on its wings, which ultimately led to a mid-air stall. Now, what if I show you a mid-air collision? This is as scary as it gets, folks. It's hard to see what's going on, but that tiny dot is a Black Hawk helicopter flying straight towards a regional jet. How does something like this even happen? How in the world did the helicopter pilot not see that jet? No way that's an engine failure or bird strike. I can't believe aviation experts would try to bait us with that one. And did you know there was a seriously ill girl on board as well? It's one of the most tragic crashes of 2025. And I gotta say, seeing something like that happen right in front of you must be so traumatic. The worst part is how the plane crashed right near a shopping center, ultimately leading to multiple casualties. And while this one sounds horrifying, this next crash is pretty similar and might haunt you for a good while. There's no action in this one, but the aftermath is crazy. This small jet didn't just crash in a residential neighborhood. No, sir. It crashed in a parking lot and took out multiple cars as well. I don't think 2025 is a good year for air travel. And now for perhaps the most devastating crash I've ever seen. This one isn't for the faint-hearted. This Jeju Airjet experienced a catastrophic bird strike, leading to a landing gear malfunction. With nowhere else to go, the pilot decided to ground the plane, only for it to go crashing straight into the concrete barrier. Believe it or not, this crash was so insane that when people first saw it, they thought it was AI. And while I'm sad for everyone on board, I just have one question. What happened to the emergency landing gear? I'm not making this up, people. This guy actually stole a plane and took it for a joyride before crashing it onto a remote island. He even tells ATC how he knows what he's doing since he's played video games. Video games, bud? Are you for real? The situation gets so bad that the army eventually has to intervene, but it's a little too late as he takes himself down with the plane, crashing it onto a remote island. Enough of these tiny jets. Ever seen a Boeing 747 go up in flames? This is what happens when someone forgets to fasten the load. This Boeing 747 was full of military vehicles when one of them broke loose and messed up the craft's balance. And the rest you can see? Anyway, this next one isn't too bad, but it's probably super expensive. See that tiny plane skid uncontrollably on the runway? Well, it's about to smack another jet. From the looks of it, this is probably a private airport, and I honestly can't imagine how something like this could happen. Never mind. There are mountains all around that airport. It must have been a really difficult approach. Speaking of difficult approaches, the chances of being struck by a crashing plane while driving down a residential neighborhood are low, but never zero. Even though it's the most random thing ever, that must have been so traumatic for everyone involved. Let's hope everyone is safe. That isn't a plane on fire. That right there is a ticking time bomb. The fire could spread any second and make things worse if they weren't already messed up. Oh, and I want you to look closely. While everyone is running away to safety, there's a passenger who stops to capture a video. Out of the dumbest things you could do near a plane crash, this has to be number one. But yeah, this is what happens when you're forced to make an emergency landing with too much fuel. Doesn't this look animated or CGI? Well, trust me, it's not. This horrific crash happened a couple of years ago in Taiwan. As the passenger jet was going down, it struck and shattered a bridge before going crashing into a river. My fear of flying just multiplied. And now for the only time when window seats aren't a good idea. I'm sure this passenger wasn't expecting a front row ticket to a crash. And I think the first mistake would be getting on a plane that literally looks like it's from Indiana Jones. Anyway, the crash happened a couple of years back in South Africa, and while it's not audible, just moments before landing, the pilots are going back and forth asking each other whether they've opened up the landing gear. Damn, if an engine on fire wasn't enough, they weren't even sure about the landing gear. Looks like it's about to be a really cool skydiving clip, right? Well, you're wrong. Just wait. What we're looking at right now is the moment right before disaster. I'm guessing the other plane also had daredevils getting ready to jump out. Otherwise, there's no reason for two crafts to be flying this close. And just when you think you've seen it all, we have the infamous Azerbaijan 2025 crash. If you don't think fog is dangerous, this is what it can do. The flight was rerouted and forced to land at a different airport after it encountered heavy fog. And while the pilots tried their level best, that too in zero visibility, to somehow steer the plane to safety, they just couldn't make it. But there's also a lot of controversy surrounding this one, even some news floating around about a missile shooting it down. I'll save that for another video. While you watch this crazy crash, let me give you some context. This flight was hijacked by 3 individuals who all died in the crash. The 2 pilots, they survived. What a miracle! Next up, we have a Russian fighter jet nosediving straight into the ground. Fighter jets usually have missiles hooked up to their wings, but I guess this one decided to become the missile itself. And while it might seem like the jet crashed in an empty field, that wasn't the case. It crashed into a 2-story building, injuring several people. How did it happen? Well, it was supposed to be a test flight for a new jet, but something probably malfunctioned. But I'm guessing it failed the test? On a side note, what's up with Russia and plane crashes? It's another military aircraft this time around. And just watch as it makes a long stretch over empty land as a black cloud of smoke shoots out one of the engines. Mind you, that isn't a small plane either. It's a cargo jet used to transport heavy machinery like tanks and other artillery weapons. But yeah, it must have been a catastrophic failure considering the plane went down. In most cases, a single engine failure isn't that big of a problem when it comes to landing. But an engine failure doesn't always mean crash landing. Check out that bird, ladies and gentlemen. It's coming in hot. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? Yep, it's going to crash straight into a house. Damn, that looks bad. The explosion literally turned night into day. Next up, we have a super close call that could have ended in disaster. Imagine cruising down the highway, and this happens. While we can't really see what's going on, there was a plane that just crashed onto the highway. I'm glad there weren't any cars around when this happened. Otherwise, yeah, like I said before, this would have been a disaster. The impact was crazy though. And while this previous one was for the books, the next clip will leave you speechless. Again, no action, but the aftermath is insane. It's a normal day in Sao Paulo. Or not. That massive fireball you see is the result of a plane crashing right into a bus. I swear, I never knew crashes like this even happened. I mean, what are the odds? We're seeing planes crash into cars, shopping centers, other planes, and buses. Guess we'll also add this one to the list of plane crashes nobody can explain. The cause? Landing gear failure. And judging from all of the emergency vehicles on standby, this probably happened up in the air. But I'm just glad it didn't end in a horror situation like the ones we saw earlier. And I think the key difference here is that the pilot landed early on, giving the plane enough time to stop from the friction. Either way, it still must be a horrifying situation to be in. I want you to keep your eye on the front wheel. Notice how it swerves and tips over the helicopter? I'm no expert, but I'm guessing it has something to do with a lock, or maybe even a human error. And in case you've never seen a helicopter crashing, prepare to be blown away. It's chaos as soon as the rotors smack the ground, with tiny sharp debris flying in all directions. Oh, and ready for the craziest part? If you look at the left side of the screen, you'll see a ground worker pulling what appears to be a gas or fuel cylinder. I can't even imagine the fiery accident if a piece of debris were to hit it. Behold, the majestic C-17, an engineering marvel built to dominate the skies. But as beautiful as this machine may be, flying it isn't exactly a walk in the park. And while it might seem the pilot has this bird under control, they've just made some crucial mistakes. Mistakes that are going to send it several feet under the earth. The plane clearly isn't running on enough power to make those sharp turns, and the sudden loss of thrust causes it to lose lift. And I think we all know what happens next. I don't really have to tell you what's going on here. Apart from that failed touch-and-go attempt, everything is evident. Guess what? It's Russia again. Seems like a nice peaceful night, right? Well, that's about to change in a second. See that fireball speeding towards the ground? That's a commercial 737 jet. And bam! Now, authorities say it was a failed landing. But I don't know. The way that bird was coming down, it didn't look anything like a landing. That was intense. But this next one takes things to a whole new level. Ever seen a failed carrier take off? You're about to. So, it's clear the plane didn't generate enough lift. But what could be the reason behind that? Simple. An extra fuel tank. You can even see the pilots try dropping it at the last second before ejecting to safety. Now for an evil helicopter pilot who downs a Cessna 120. Let me rephrase that. Now for a Cessna 120 pilot who's never heard of wake turbulence. And don't worry if you haven't either. It's just a fancy word for the airwaves a helicopter's rotors leave behind. The Cessna 120 pilot unknowingly flies straight into it, getting hit hard as it stalls and nosedives towards the concrete. Here's a fun fact before we move to the next clip. Did you know even hobby drones leave behind wake turbulence? Hold on to your seats because we're not done yet. You're about to witness a fire drill go horribly wrong. All these trucks are scrambling to complete a safety drill on the runway. Yep, you heard that right. And as they're carelessly going about their drill, an actual commercial airliner speeding down the runway clips one of the trucks before erupting into flames. Talk about a drill turning into a real-life situation, though. I'm glad there were firefighters around to put out the flames quickly. They were probably preparing for something like this. Everything seems normal so far. That DHL cargo plane sticks the landing and smoothly caresses the runway as it slowly comes to a stop. Wait a minute. Why did it just start drifting? I don't think this was supposed to happen, but this plane literally drifted off the runway, nearly pulling off a 360. This probably has to do with a slippery runway, or one of the landing gears might have burst at the last second. But if you thought that was something, just wait until you see what's next. A runway made of dirt, no control tower, a tiny fence sealing off the airport. Yep, this isn't going to end well. Now, the pilot does manage to lift the bird at the last moment, but that doesn't last for long. The plane crashed a couple of miles ahead as it failed to gain enough altitude. I think we all saw that coming. But just when you thought it couldn't get any crazier, here comes another shocker. Blink and you'll miss it. This happened in Japan as two planes collided at the Tokyo airport. It's hard to see what's going on, but a commercial airliner is taxiing towards the runway to take off right when a Coast Guard plane crashes straight into it. The air traffic controller probably fell asleep. Wait, no, that's actually true. The air traffic controller actually fell asleep. That's just absurd. Speaking of absurd, have a look at this crash landing. Honestly speaking, I don't know if we should call this one a crash. I mean, the fact that the pilot was able to land the plane on the runway without causing any fatal damage is mind-blowing. And yes, there was a little run-in with an SUV, but it's all good. I'm sure insurance covers a plane crash, right? Right? The pilot deserves some serious credit, though. Imagine the skill it must have taken to avoid hitting any of the light poles. Here's a pilot who couldn't avoid them. Not a plane, but still an epic crash. So these guys are trying to lift up a huge Christmas tree using a helicopter. Wait, why is there a helicopter when there are so many of these ropes hanging around? I don't know how this was supposed to end. And did you see that violent little shimmy the helicopter did before snapping in half? That pilot is lucky to be alive. Just like this guy. So, what happened here? This doesn't look like a stall to me. If I had to guess, something probably malfunctioned in the engine, as the jet failed to gain thrust. And while the jet is literally shredded into pieces because of that fiery explosion, that ejection seat sure did look cool. But hold on, because if you thought that was wild, wait till you see this. To be fair, I've never seen anyone so confident and calm while crashing a plane. I mean, I love the wave of calmness as he yanks the throttle while going straight towards a hangar. Did he really think he could take off like that? Even in the last 2 seconds before the crash, he's confident the Cessna's imaginary boosters will kick in and somehow lift him above this hangar. And for those of you wondering, he walked out without a scratch. 2 helicopters in one frame? I smell disaster. That guy is lucky to be alive. The amount of debris that went flying after the blades collided is just wild. Just imagine all the sharp pieces that could have struck him. But, yeah, this pilot is gonna have some explaining to do. 1 second, everything's normal, and the next, total chaos. This isn't your regular plane. No, sir, that right there is the legendary P-51. A true classic in the world of aviation. And this isn't going to be an ordinary crash either. In fact, it's without a doubt the deadliest crash ever. The pilot is attempting to do what appears to be a cartwheel when he fails to pull up in time. What happens next? The plane hits the ground hard, disintegrating into thousands of pieces as a cloud of smoke and dust takes over the horizon. Did you think we're done? Not even close. I'm a huge fan of this aircraft, but it was only today that I realized it also means double the trouble. Because if that thing were to go down, what a near miss. Just imagine the destruction if this thing had crashed on the carrier. It ended up falling another 10 meters below until it finally hit the ocean. All 3 men aboard the Osprey unfortunately lost their lives in what could have been one of the worst military aviation accidents in history. Next up, a clip that's not only going to blow your mind, but also leave you utterly confused. The calm before the storm is a bit too suspicious. This tiny jet is about to make a heroic takeoff, and after getting the go-ahead from the ATC, it's time for liftoff. That was brutal. A nose-first dive straight into the tarmac. Oh, and by the way, the late pilot behind the bird, an F-14 expert with over 5,000 hours in the air. Believe it or not, he even did a lot of the in-air stunt scenes in the original Top Gun. Now for a cartwheel gone wrong. Fighter jets don't normally do this. Of course, if it's needed in combat, they'll whip out a move or two. but this footage is from an air show, and trust me, it's going to end badly. You can see the plane try to straighten out at the last moment, but it's too late. And as calm as the sky may look, the ground will definitely tell a different story. Here's another moment you have to see to believe. A deafening explosion, blinding fire, and then nothing but silence. There's no other way to put it. This helicopter snapped in half after a critical engine failure and crashed straight into an apartment building. It must have been such a nightmare for those on board and inside their homes. You've seen a lot so far, but nothing like what I'm about to show you next. What freaks me out is how this wasn't even an air show or anything. Chances are, the pilot lost control of the jet and crashed onto a busy street. And trust me, there's nothing they could have done here. No second chances, no escape, just the cold reality of speed and physics. There are no words I can use to explain how horrifying this must have been. This clip is from Nepal, and the impact shattered everything: wings, fuselage, and the lives of those on board. It's also hard to tell what happened because it crashed in such an awkward way. Probably after taking off, I suppose. Who knew helicopters were this fragile? This Russian Mi-8 snapped in half as soon as it hit the ground. Let's keep it rolling. Have you watched Top Gun? All the cool tricks, planes, and just the need for speed. It's awesome. But this is what happens when you attempt to pull off a stunt from the movie. And trust me, there's nothing on this planet that can prepare you for the sight of watching a plane at full speed hit the earth. The pilot tries to recover but fails and is violently ejected out of the jet as it crashes into the water and sends debris flying in all directions. Let's end this video with a brutal first-person view of a crash. These two pilots seem to have everything under control as they're making their way towards a dirt runway. I figure they overshot the runway and decided to abort the landing to come around for a better approach. Their first mistake? Banking left towards the trees. The second? Banking too hard and not giving the plane enough power. You can actually see the instructor slowly reduce the power. And I'm not a pilot, but even I know there's a problem when you're lower than the tree line. You can actually see the exact moment when the plane gives in and starts to dip before crashing straight into the trees. Anyway, that's it from my side, folks. So, what do you think? Did you know there were over 80 plane crashes in 2025 alone? And is there a horrifying crash I missed out in this video? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more interesting videos in the future. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.